He replaced her with a noble Luna, then lost everything he had ever loved. Mara Voss had never been the kind of woman who asked for much. She did not ask for flowers on her birthday, or praise after long nights spent organizing supply routes and mediating border disputes. She did not ask Damon to hold her hand in front of the Pack Council, or to introduce her with the kind of warmth that would have made it clear to everyone what she was to him. She asked for very little, and for 7 years, she told herself that was fine. That love did not need to be announced to be real. She was wrong about that. But she would not understand how wrong until the day the Silvercrest delegation arrived, and everything she had quietly built began to come apart. Damon Crest had been alpha of the Iron Veil Pack for 5 years, when Lady Seraphine Alvard walked through the great wooden doors of the pack hall. He had earned the title the hard way, through 3 years of border conflicts, 2 brutal winters, and more losses than he liked to remember. Mara had been beside him through every one of those seasons, not in a ceremonial way, not standing behind him with a title and a practiced smile. She had been beside him in the actual way, the way that means showing up at dawn when the supply wagons broke down, staying up through the night with injured wolves who were too proud to admit they were afraid, learning the name of every warrior's child so that no one in Iron Veil ever felt invisible. The pack loved her for it. The elders respected her. Even the wolves who were too young to remember the hard years knew that Mara Voss was someone you could count on. Damon knew it too. He simply forgot, for a while, how rare that was. Seraphine Alvard was everything Mara was not, at least on the surface. She came from one of the oldest noble families in the region, with a bloodline that traced back 4 generations of recognized Lunas. She was educated in the formal traditions of pack diplomacy. She wore her authority like a second skin, quiet and composed, the kind of woman who could silence a room without raising her voice. She was not unkind. That was important to understand. She was not a villain in this story. She was simply the wrong woman in the wrong place, and Damon was simply a man who mistook elegance for strength and title for substance. The delegation had come to discuss a political alliance, trade routes, territory agreements, the kind of things that sound dull until you realize they determine whether your pack eats well through winter or barely survives it. Damon had prepared carefully for the summit. He knew the stakes. What he had not prepared for was the way Saraphene looked at him, like he was already the kind of alpha she had been told to expect. Like he was significant, and because he was a man who had spent 5 years feeling the weight of leadership and very little of its reward, that look landed somewhere deep. Mara noticed the shift before she had words for it. She noticed the way Damon laughed more easily in Seraphine's company, the way he straightened his posture slightly when she entered a room, the way he remembered, suddenly, to pull out chairs and speak slowly and choose his words with care. Things he had stopped bothering to do around Mara years ago, because Mara had always just understood him without the effort. She told herself it was politics. She was good at telling herself things. 3 weeks into the delegation's visit, Mara was called to a formal council meeting she had not been warned about. She arrived to find 6 council members seated around the long stone table, their expressions carefully neutral in the way that told her they had practiced being neutral before she walked in. The eldest council member, a wolf named Harkin who had known Mara since she was 19 years old, was the one who spoke. He did not meet her eyes while he did it. He told her that Alpha Damon had decided to pursue a formal mating bond with Lady Seraphine Alvard. He told her that the match would bring significant political benefit to Iron Veil, noble alliance, trade access, legitimacy in the eyes of the wider pack world. He told her that her own bond with Damon, while meaningful, had never been formally registered or ratified under pack law, and therefore carried no legal standing. He told her she would be offered a settlement, a cottage in the outer wards, a monthly stipend, a reassignment to outer patrol coordination, which was a real role with real responsibility, he was careful to add, as if that would help. Mara sat through all of it without speaking. She was good at that too. When Harkin finished, she asked one question. She asked if Damon knew she was in this meeting. Harkin looked at the table. That was her answer. She did not cry. She did not raise her voice. She stood up, thanked the council for their time, in a tone that was perfectly polite and absolutely empty, and walked out into the cold afternoon air. She stood outside the hall for a long moment, looking at the mountains at the edge of Ironvale's territory, the same mountains she had looked at every morning for 7 years, and she breathed. Then she went home and began to pack. She did not sign their settlement papers. She did not take their stipend. She took only what was hers and moved herself to the outer wards without waiting for anyone to escort her. The wolves who lived and worked out there were not nobility. They were the ones who fixed the fence lines in the rain and ran the perimeter in the dark and got quietly overlooked at every pack gathering because the Alpha House was always too busy with more important matters. Mara introduced herself to each of them personally. She learned their names, and then she learned the names of their families. She asked what they needed, listened to the answers, and then did something remarkable. She actually did the things they asked. Within a month, the outer wards were more organized than they had been in years. The mating ceremony between Damon and Seraphine took place on a clear evening in late autumn. It was a beautiful event. Noble families sent representatives. The pack council smiled in official photographs. Trade agreements were drafted and signed over the following weeks. And for a brief, promising season, it seemed like Damon had made the right calculation. He had not. The first sign was small. Damon asked Saraphene to check on an elder wolf named Cass who had been unwell. Saraphene went. She was polite and correct, and brought the proper herbs and said the proper things. Cass thanked her. But later, when Damon asked how Cass was doing, Saraphene said she seemed fine. She did not mention that Cass had a daughter she had not spoken to in 2 years. She did not mention that the real issue was not the illness, but the loneliness underneath it. She had not known to look for those things. Mara would have known. Mara had always known. The second sign was in the hunts. Morning hunts had always run smoothly under the old rhythm, but that rhythm had been quietly maintained by Mara, who knew which warriors worked well together, and which ones needed space, who knew which routes were fastest in early frost, and which ones flooded after rain. Without that knowledge running quietly in the background, the hunts became technically correct and emotionally flat. The warriors came back with game, but not with the particular energy that makes a pack feel like a pack. The third sign was the council. The elders had always been difficult, but they had been manageable, because Mara had known each of them well enough to know what they actually needed to hear versus what they asked for. Without her reading the room, meetings grew long and tense and unproductive. Damon found himself frustrated after every session without fully understanding why. He started to understand why around the 8th month. It was a warrior named Breck who said it out loud, though he looked nervous doing it. He said simply that things had felt different since Mara left. Not worse in any one big way he could point to, just different, quieter. Like something that had been holding things together had gone, and nobody had noticed it was there until it was not. Damon did not respond. He went home and sat in the Alpha House, which was large and well-furnished and very, very quiet. The political alliance collapsed 14 months after the ceremony. It was not Seraphine's fault. It was not Damon's fault, not entirely. It was the nature of political alliances, built on titles rather than trust. They hold beautifully until the first real pressure arrives, and then they crack along every line that was never properly sealed. A territorial dispute between the Silvercrest family and a neighboring noble house put Ironvale in an impossible position. Damon chose neutrality. Seraphine's family viewed the choice as an insult. There were letters, then fewer letters, then a formal message requesting Seraphine's return for a family consultation. She went. She was not cold about it, and she was not warm about it. She was simply, and Damon finally understood this word in its fullest meaning, absent. She had always been present in form and absent in substance, and now she was absent in both, and the difference was not as large as he had expected. He was left with a quiet house, a strained pack, and a very clear view of every choice he had made over the past 2 years. The council suggested, carefully, that he reach out to Mara. They had been receiving reports from the outer wards, productivity figures, morale assessments, community feedback. The numbers were good, more than good. The outer ward district had, under Mara's coordination, become one of the most functional communities in Ironvale. Wolves who had spent years feeling overlooked were now engaged, organized, and loyal, in a way that made the rest of the pack look shabby by comparison. Damon went to find her on an ordinary Tuesday morning in early spring. He had considered sending a message first, and decided that was cowardly. He walked to the outer wards himself, without escort, without announcement. He found her near the eastern fence line, standing with a group of 3 wolves and a hand-drawn map, working through a revised supply route for the coming season. She looked exactly like herself. That was somehow the hardest part, that she had not diminished. That whatever he had feared losing her would do to her, had simply not happened, because Mara Voss had never needed his reflection to know who she was. She saw him coming, and said something to the group, who moved off to give them space. She folded the map and waited. He said he was sorry. He said it without decoration, without the kind of careful language people use when they want to apologize, and also want to be forgiven, and also want to seem impressive while doing both. He simply said that he had made choices that were wrong, and that she had deserved better, and that he was sorry. She was quiet for a moment. A bird moved through the bare branches of the tree above them. The morning was cold and very clear. Then she told him 3 things. She said that she forgave him, not because what he did was acceptable, and not because she had forgotten any of it, but because she had spent 7 years learning to carry heavy things for other people, and she was not willing to spend the rest of her life carrying resentment for herself. She said it calmly, the way she said most things, like it had already been decided somewhere inside her, and she was simply letting him know. She said that she was not coming back, not to the Alpha House, and not to the role she had occupied before. She said this without bitterness. She said it the way someone says a true thing that needs to be said. The outer wards were her responsibility now, and the wolves there had counted on her when no one else had, and she would not leave them simply because an easier situation had presented itself. And then she said the third thing, which was the hardest for him to hear, not because it was cruel, but because it was not. She said she hoped he would become the alpha his pack deserved. She said the pack was good, and the pack needed good leadership, and she still believed, in the frustrating, clear-eyed way that had always been particular to her, that he was capable of it, if he chose to actually do the work. Then she unfolded her map and went back to her supply routes. He stood there for a long moment, long enough to understand that there was nothing left to say, and that this particular kind of ending, was not something that could be fixed or argued with, or negotiated. It was simply the truth of what had happened, and the truth of what would come next. He walked back to the Alpha House. He was different after that, and the pack noticed. Not suddenly, not in any dramatic way, but over the following months, Damon began to show up in the actual way, the way Mara had always shown up, that he had watched for years without fully understanding what he was watching. He learned the names of the warriors' children. He asked the elders real questions, and listened to the answers even when they were uncomfortable. He promoted wolves from the outer wards, because they had proven themselves, and because it was right. The pack grew steadier, it grew warmer. It became, slowly and imperfectly, the kind of place that holds together not because of titles or alliances, but because the people inside it feel known. The Outer Ward District was formally recognized as a representative seat on the Iron Vale Council. Mara accepted the seat. She was, as everyone expected, very good at it. They saw each other at council meetings, once a month. They were professional and honest and civil in the way that people are when they have been through something real together and come out the other side not as enemies, but as 2 separate people with separate lives and a shared history that no longer needed to be resolved. Sometimes, when a hard decision was made correctly, she would catch his eye across the table and give him a small nod. The kind that meant simply, yes, that was the right thing. He always felt it more than he showed. That was the story of what happened in Iron Vale. Not a story about a great love destroyed exactly, but a story about a man who held something rare and did not recognize it until he had already let it go, and a woman who did not need to be recognized to know her own worth, and who built something real, with quiet hands and a steady heart, in the place where no one was looking.